Hi, everyone. I really encourage you to watch this interview with Marlee Starliper about the process of deciding to leave NC State and how she got clarity to choose University of Colorado and what it's like to enter the transfer portal. So this interview, if you're either choosing a college or transferring to another one, can provide you a lot of clarity and save you a lot of heartbreak. You are now have announced that you're transferring to the University of Colorado. Let's start with, what was that like to come to the decision to enter the transfer portal?
It's really hard when you're thinking about transferring, and then, the process, being back in like the recruitment process, like it's very difficult because it's also like, I was there for 3 years. Like I had friends there, I had community there, and I got used to the place, and it's hard when you make the decision to uproot yourself and completely dive into the unknown again. Like it was very big picture. Like I just got to a point where I realized, like, more so than anything with just the running side of things, like overall, like I just wasn't happy and it just wasn't working for me. And I think just in a lot of different ways, I knew that I just was never quite myself there. I am such a big believer in, like, our minds are so powerful, like our thoughts, all that, like that has impact on our entire lives. And I think we have more control over certain things and like our happiness than we realize. But when it comes down to it, you got to do what's best for you to take ownership of your story. And like, if you need to change your environment, like there's so much power in that. And not to say, like, I found so many good things at NC State. Like there's a lot of grief in the things that I'm leaving behind. Like it's so bittersweet. There's so many associations there, like with the struggle that I had, that like it felt like a physical burden sometimes. And like I was dealing with things like, I would say like even just like anxiety kind of going out on runs, because even being in the city, I'm like, this doesn't make my heart sing, like spiritually, like running such a spiritual thing. Like I would struggle with those things every day. Came upon me when I was out of town, out of Raleigh for a weekend. And that's just really when it just hit me all of a sudden that I need to make this change.
Take us through the steps of what's it like going into the transfer portal?
I remember, like, at first I was like, gosh, like part of the fear with transferring was like, I didn't have too many college accolades. I was like, I've just dealt with so much injury. Like I was like, is any place even gonna want me? I had, ideas of like the places I was most interested in looking into and all that. I still put where like other coaches could contact. And then, within an hour or two, like there's emails coming in and I'm like, oh gosh, like, oh. And I'm like, well, this is encouraging. And I'm like, oh, like it was honestly really special. Like, I'm like, wow. Like, some of them are places where like, maybe I went to school I've never heard of, or a different division. And I'm like, thank you so much, but like, no thanks. But all in all, like, I think it was really just humbling and encouraging being through that process again. Cause I'm like, there are people and places that still believe in me, that they still, know my name and want to help me explore the potential that's there. So that just really meant a lot. I had to really reflect, like, okay, do I want to go to a place where I have a team to chase big goals with, or where I can more so train on my own and just focus on that? And that question, I think a lot of answer to prayer happened through conversations I had with other friends of mine who encouraged me, like, I think it's going to be really good for you to grow as a runner and athlete, surrounding yourself with a team still and pursuing.
You do mention your faith, and there are athletes who are aligned with Jesus and Christianity, and then other athletes who aren't, but they have spirit and spirituality. Talk to us about how that intention and attention really helped you get to the truth of your decision.
The intention, I think, is I really wanted a place where I could be myself, and the way I hear it in my mind is like in a place where I can just like spread my wings and feel free to fly. That is a way that I'm very much like myself, because in that and in the joy that I find rooted in like who I am, like that's something that's from the Lord. Just that joy, like that's just wrapped up in all the passion that I have inside of me. I think that was the intention. Like it just this very deep rooted sense of feeling free to be myself and live out that joy and that passion. I'm curious if you could elaborate more actually on the attention side.
Yeah, so attention is just taking time to focus on this process. Conversations with others,
Mhm.
hey, I'm thinking about this thing and I trust your feedback, or just looking within yourself and saying, I'm just going to take a little time. You mentioned journaling. I'm just going to take a little time to pay attention to this crux, or this upset or whatever in my life. I'm going to take a little time and kind of unpack that, sort it out.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's helpful. I think attention wise, I very much was, trying to stay in tune with myself and how I felt, when I was going on visits, when I'm at the place and with the people. But I think even before that, in the conversations I had, I put a ton of attention in asking all the little nitty gritty questions. I think it's scary too, because, people, I'll just never forget so many people saying this, if they're like, oh, like, you just get that feeling. And I'm like, I felt like I had that at NC State. And again, I will still say, like, I have found the things that drew me there. Like, I still am just like so thankful that I got to see and experience that. Yeah, being through the process again, I'm like, yeah, you never quite know what you're gonna get until you're in it. That's probably the biggest point of attention, is staying centered within myself and what I'm feeling as you're taking in all the smaller external details, if that makes sense.
Okay. Can you give us some specifics? What was your checklist of questions you asked coaches?
I'll get into like certain questions that I asked, but also I knew I had to love where I was running every day. And again, engaging my spirit with that. Like, I feel like it sounds funny. There's a sort of intimacy with running, like with the earth, like I feel like that's how I would put it. And yes, having a team to run with. In terms of questions that I asked, like, I love hearing the details of like, okay, anything from as small as like when the practice times are. And like, I love when I'm there, I'm like, I really watch even like the warm-up routines. I also love learning the details of like, tell me like what your tempo workouts are like, or like the track workouts. The structure of the week, I think, was a big one that I made sure of. I ask about the strength training and the nutritionist, the sports psych, like the different resources they have. Are people okay? Like if someone chooses to run alone, like would that be an opportunity? I feel like you get this, like I have heard this like from, Mark and Heather at CU. Like I loved hearing their coaching philosophies and just like how they do things and how they build recovery, like they're into the program, just the things that they're super intentional about. I loved hearing their philosophies behind things and hearing that for other places too. I think it's just really important. Yeah.
So, all right. And as I listen to you, I wish that little 18-year-old Meg could have talked to 20-year-old Marlee before she went off to college, because I didn't know clarity is key.
Mm-hmm.
And what worked for you? What were your values versus, say, a toxic team culture or a competitive team culture? What environment do you want, right? And then you said the schedule. What does the schedule look like? And does it work for what worked for you in high school? Part of team culture is it okay to run on my own? Or are people going to be like, oh, she's running on her own, right? Resources, the athletic trainers, the nutritionists, sports psychologists, and mental health, that value there. All right, so anything else you want to add to that list? Because this is landmark for a lot of high school kids who are thinking about how they navigate to the right home for them, but also people who are transferring.
What, again, I think really made CU stand out was the way that I connected with the coaches. That was really special, getting to know Mark and Heather, because what I saw in them is like they're so intellectual and like so scientific, and I'm just talking with them and I'm like, wow, like these are people that like I just really want to keep learning from. I just, through injury and everything and the struggles I had, like I really backed away from the sport, but I'm like, I really want to lean in and become a student of the sport again. So I just saw them, I was like, these are people who like I just know, like within running, but even in a bigger picture than running, I'm like, these are people who can be mentors that I would just love to keep having conversations with and pulling knowledge from them.
All right, so you took a visit out there. What was that visit like?
Even just arriving to Boulder, to that place, and I'm just like, wow, I can just look at those mountains and I will feel close to the Lord, and it just feels like everything is put into perspective. And that's a really special thing. Adventure is just right out the door. I've also realized, like, for my happiness and to live out who I am, like, I love when I can go on those little small adventures or big adventures. And that's the type of place where I'm like, it is right there. And there's an abundance of people who I could do that with. So it's cool even just seeing, like, you can just see it in the culture there. I'm friends with Emily Covert on the team. So she was kind of started off my visit. She took me to the farmer's market and we're like, trying all the samples, having a great old time. It was so much fun. Yeah, and then I got to hang out with the team a little bit more that night. The next day, got to see the people at practice since there's a smaller group of them going out for their run, got to see that. And then I really spent most of the day with Mark and Heather, and they showed me, like, you know, the locations that they do some of their runs on. And I also loved how it's like you get the mountains, but then there's also some places where it's like farmhouses and like ranch, and it's like I'm from a little farm town, so I'm like, oh, like I love that. I get best of both worlds here. The last, you know, few hours of my visit, I got to watch some people doing workouts on the indoor track, and again, I was recovering from my injury, so I hopped on, like, it's like the air bike, whatever you call it. I've never been on one before, but I was hammering.
That's the one with the big fan? The big
yes.
fan? Yes.
And the altitude, I'm watching them do their thing, and I'm doing whatever random intervals on this thing, and it was so hard at one point. I was like, and because the altitude, I think I was starting to feel it around then. And I was like, at one point, I'm like, oh my word, I'm like, I almost had to hop off. I'm like, I am nauseous right now, but I was like, I'll just do one more interval set. So got in a good workout there, and then that was pretty much my visit.
So now how many years of eligibility do you have for Colorado to be a Buffalo?
For now, what's certain is I basically have a full 3 years, as long as I can get a medical red shirt. And if I were to be able to get that also, which I think I can, yeah, it's funny because if I were to get that medical red shirt for cross, that would actually mean a 7th year, which I highly doubt I'm gonna do. But I'm like, back pocket, you know.
You'll be an old lady in college. You'll be walking around with a cane.
I'm like, I really hope I don't have to do that, but yeah, just in case, we'll probably do it maybe when the time comes. But yeah, it's kind of a question mark if I'll be able to get it for outdoor or not, because I think they say halfway through the season, and I'm like, you know, I made it to nationals last year, so it's like, if we look at it that way, it's like, well, then it is still the halfway point, but I'm not sure how they do that, because, you know, track is a little different than some other sports, so that I will need to figure that out. I'm really hopeful I can get it to get those full 3 years. So yeah, basically 3 more years. So I know, like, a lot of time.
And you're a fighter. When you look at like the top 10 girls at East Bay, your senior year, you got second, right, at East Bay that year, 2019, right? So Dudek was first. She's at Stanford. Jenna Hutchins at BYU, Sydney Mascarelli, NC State, Carly McNatt.
Oh, I think you mean UNC.
Oh, yeah. UNC, right? Okay. Carly McNatt, Kate Weiser, Tatum David was 10th, who is high school. I work with Tatum. She's run 4:35. She's doing good. Of those women, I don't know that their careers have gone on the same trajectory they were in high school. How could you encourage other girls to realize that they have choices?
Like, I've thought about that a lot. Like the incredible people that I competed with in high school, and how reach out and see how some people are doing, because it's like, I know, like, they have probably really felt the things that I felt. I post articles on the Fan Hub, and I'm trying to rework on my website, so hopefully I'm working on that so I can say, oh, I have a website, and restart the blog there too. But because I've wanted to just share just like what's been in my heart this whole time, even when, yeah, the trajectory has not gone how me or anyone else, you know, hoped and thought that it would or could. And that's really hard. And I mean, I truly got to a point where I was like, am I kidding myself? Picked myself back up from the ground again, even though it felt like so many times just like hitting the ground and falling apart. Like, I felt like with every injury, with every setback, like, it was scary for me because it just got harder every time. It's also a funny thing where it's like, it can feel like the end of the world sometimes. And I'm like, okay, we're just talking about a sport here. Like, I'm glad that I feel things that deeply and that I am that passionate. Like, I think there's a lot of beauty in that, in the heartbreak that I have over these things when people are like, oh, it's just a sport. And it's like, but my passion, it's not just for running, it's how I use that for my faith. And that's just what has kept me going, getting centered in myself again. I know who I am and I know what I have inside. And I'm like, I just know that I just haven't seen it yet. When like I was thinking that, you know, I would probably stay at NC State, finish out my degree, and, you know, go from maybe transfer then, like see what things look like there. But I just realized that this is just what this looks like for me personally. I think that was me getting complacent. Like I need to be in a place where I am set on fire. I need to leave this because that's keeping me in a place where I'm just not who I am. I think it's just important to ask yourself, like, am I really myself here? Yeah, it's scary, but I think it's worth the risk if you feel stuck in that place.